Hey guys, Josh back with another video, and today we're going to cover a spot that uh, I don't think I've um, done much content on at any sort of depth. So we're going to be talking about single raise pot button versus big blinds, and we're going to be talking about um, probing turns and then splitting our river strategy, and just discussing um, how you know general value thresholds, what our incentives are as far as sizings go across different textures and things like that. The boards we're going to use are boards where regs are playing more checkbacks. Um, so we're not going to be doing high dry boards, for instance. It's going to be more wet boards, where imposition should be checking back a bit more. So uh, yeah, let's hop right into it. So we're going to start with the higher boards. Um, we're generally going to do jack high and lower boards today, since um, these are these are the boards that regs are going to be betting less often on average, as a c bet. So we have more opportunities to probe turns. Um, Jack 8-3 two tone is a pretty good example. The imposition c bet strategy should be relatively polar. It's not going to be, you know, a range bet for small or anything, um, especially at the higher rake, like mid stakes rake. So, um, first, let's talk about our probe strategy. Uh, in Pio, we oh, check check. Um, Pio has this very nice, very sexy, hotness window here, just to map out the frequencies. So you can see across the board, um, on something like a jack high board, out of position isn't going to be probing terribly often. What you'll notice is on the lower boards, the out of position player is going to be probing turn more, since the board has less interaction with the high card heavy range of in position. So, you know, a couple things to note here. Um, on flush completing turns, the out of position player is probing more often. That's because imposition is going to be betting flush draws on the flop more often than other suited combos. So after it goes check check, um, the out of position player can um, probe relatively often, as opposed to the other cards. Um, another thing you'll notice is the higher the turn, generally the less often we're betting. Um, so, for example, on a king, we're checking 74%. On an ace, we're checking 84%. Whereas, on a six or a five, we're only checking about two-thirds of the time. So let's take a look. Another thing to note is that on jack high boards, well, jack or even queen high or king high boards, the the higher textures are going to interact better with the imposition range, even if they check back. Like, they're not pure betting top pair on this board. So generally, we're going to be probing less, and imposition is just going to take a hand like Jack five suited that they check back on the flop, and then occasionally probe the turn. Um, so I guess the general threshold would be something like Jack seven or better. Um, Although that's a pretty wet board, maybe a deuce of clubs. Now these lower jack actually checking back quite a bit. Um, but yeah, you'll notice this on the high boards. The imposition delay c-bet strategy is going to be relatively polar, especially on a brick, since most of the hands that check back on the flop don't improve on a deuce. So it's just something like ace king or ace queen trying to get to showdown. Whereas if it was like a three, now you'll see imposition. Um, I'm just guessing here. but you'll start to see imposition use like some smaller sizes to value bet ace king, ace queen high. Let's see. Yeah, so now you'll notice like imposition still has this polar size or the the good top pair that they check back the flop to bet the turn with. However, stuff like ace queen, ace king, ace queen is now um, starting to bet small to get some thin value. Um, yeah, like ace 10 with a suit. Having the suit is it might be a bit counterintuitive. It's like, well, don't we want to unblock their calls? Well, if you have a spade in your hand, um, you're it's very unlikely that you get check raised. So uh, it's just kind of nice to use those hands. And then when you hit a pair, like if you have the 10 of spades in your hand, if you hit a pair, it's not going to complete the flush because you have the spade, so you can value bet the river. Um, okay, so we're talking about the turn probe here. So we'll just use a brick. So on a brick, since the board's a bit higher, the out of position player isn't going to be probing terribly often. And so, the out of position player is going to be using a relatively polar strategy. Since, we determined, or, the imposition player is checking back a bunch of weaker top pair. So we're not going to go bananas with like lower top pair. Okay, so let's get a turn where, yeah, because I wanted to talk about spots where we're going to be splitting. So actually, we can do a brick first. Let's start with bricks. So here, our turn strategy is going to be relatively polar. We'll just use this. Actually, let me just run a subtree real quick. Okay, so I basically just, on the turn, I gave both players this 30, 70, 133, 200, 300. And then that same scheme for out of position on the river. So yeah, a little bit of blocking here, but generally on a brick. So after it goes check, check, if it's a total brick, neither player's range really improves to any significant number of hands. So our strongest hands, something like Queen Jack, King Jack, Ace Jack, these hands want to get as much money into the pot as possible because imposition doesn't really improve on this card. So they're going to be betting quite big. So in this spot, the out of position player is probing for this very big 2x pot size. Ace Jack even making it into like 3x pot. But it's just a function of how bricky the turn is. So let's talk about, yeah, let's talk about this this big size, because this is really where a lot of your EV comes from, is getting a bunch of money in with these top pairs. So go through some rivers. So what you'll notice after the very polar turn probe is, after it goes bet call, there's going to be some very big bets, even some jams on some rivers. And I'll give you guys a chance to pause the video for a second. Look over this heat map here and try to think about, so this very dark red size, like for instance on the 10, this is jam, so it's a good bit over 3x pot jam on the river after 2xing the turn. So try to pause the video and think about why some of these turns are doing that. Okay, so a couple things you should notice. There are a few cards that are getting bet. Well, there's a couple classes of river cards that are getting bet very frequently. One of them is flush completing rivers. And the reason this is because if we 2x the turn, generally when you're using a very polar strategy and you're betting very big, especially when you're out of position, your draws need to be quite strong. So for instance, something like 5-4 is getting overbet for this big size much more often than something like 6-5 of clubs, or ace-4 of clubs. So when you're out of position, your draws need to be stronger the bigger you bet generally. So if we think about what a bunch of our bluffs need to be, it's going to be a lot of flush draws. Something like king 5 of spades, it's just pure big betting. Whereas some of these straight just gutters, naked gutters, are just blocking or checking. So after we bet very big and we get a spade on the river, it's an incredibly good card for our range. So here on this spade river, we're almost range betting the river. The only the only hands we're checking really are just give ups. The 5-4 we overbet the turn with. Those are just giving up, and then something like ace-5 with a spade occasionally. But if you have the ace of spades, you're just bluffing a lot. It's really just a ton of betting. And your bluffs are just going to come from like this 9-7, like queen 10 off, queen 9 off with a spade are going to be some of your best bluffs on the river for the bigger size. But I wanted to point out that, in a spot where we're range betting or close to range betting, we have to be splitting. So you'll notice all four sizes are getting used at some frequency here. So because the 7 improves 10-9 as well, which is going to be a decent turn bet for us. So we're just going to have so many classes of hands that want to carve out their own size. We're going to have something like ace-jack or ace-jack, king-jack that want to block and get called by a worse jack. Or, like a pair plus spade hand or something. And then we're going to, and then besides that, we're going to have, jack 8, these low sets, which want their own size. That's kind of a nice 2/3 pot bet on the river. And then we're going to have flushes, which want to go big. So, like nut flushes are doing a good bit of jamming on the river. So then, when you're mixing bluffs on the river, you'll notice like the suit is quite relevant to what size you're taking. So, on a jack high board, impositions can have a lot of offsuit top pair, stuff like queen jack off, jack 9 off, jack 10 off, something like jack 10 off, jack 9 off are going to be some of impositions best call downs. So, when we're selecting bluffs, we'd much rather use something like queen 10 off or queen 9 off for the big size. And then, for that size, we're not going to mix something like ace 6 off or ace 5 off into that size very often. Just because with something like queen 10 or queen 9, we double block top pair, whereas with a ace 6 or ace 5, we don't block nearly as much top pair. And if we bet big on a river that completes this many draws, stuff like lower top pair is going to fold. So when we have something like ace 6 or ace 5, those lower cards actually block folds. So you know, if we are to bluff this hand, we'd rather go like pretty small or very big. We just don't have that many great blockers to top here. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about some other rivers. So we'll do like this low straight completing card. So something like a 5. Now we have a pretty significant nut advantage in straights, and after turn goes back call or 2x pot call, imposition doesn't really have any straights besides like the occasional combo draw that they turned with like ace 4 of spades or something, or 6-4 of spades. So you know, if we have a straight here on the river, or if you have a set here on the river, you pretty much have the nuts. Set has 95% equity here, so you can just go all in because this completes straights that your opponent can't have. And you know, our bluffs here are going to come from something like 5-4. Just you know, generally, you want to block the hands that improve for imposition on the river, because their call downs on this board ideally are going to have some interaction with blocking our nutted hands. So on a low straight completing card like this, you'll notice that a lot of spade combos are bluffing. And this is just because imposition is floating the combo draws on the turn with a spade. So if we look at the response against a jam, you know, imposition is going to have. I guess imposition should be floating the ace 4 here on jack 8-3. Yeah, I kind of wasn't paying attention to the texture, but when you have something like ace 4, you should be floating this hand a lot because you unblock bluffs. Remember, we were talking about for this big size that we're not using like some of these naked gutters. We're actually using the combo draws and the flush draws more often. So when you have ace 4 here, you unblock all the like 10-9, queen-9, queen-10, all that stuff, and then you unblock the flush draws, and you have an overcard and a gutter. So this is a, you know, ace 4, ace 5 are pretty nice, you know, bluff catchers on the turn here. So, you know, if you have a 4 on the river, it's pretty ideal to use that one. And in addition, I don't think regs are finding these hands, you know, as floats on the turn with something like ace 4. So I think you know, for this very big size, we should probably bump up this frequency. You know, I can just run a log sim real quick, and I can demonstrate this. Okay, I won't spend you know, a ton of time on this, but just wanted to demonstrate. So basically versus 2x, I locked imposition to overfold this ace 4, ace 5 stuff. So now a lot of our bluffs, especially with, you know, better blockers, are going to be using the size a lot more. However, you know, if we get this 5 river, now we're, you know, jamming the river significantly more often, because imposition's overfolding the turn with ace 4. So if we have ace jack, now we're, especially when we have the ace of spades blocking ace 4 of spades, that's going to float the turn. Now we're very comfortable just putting our stack in. And then yeah, if we have like, if we have 4x spades here, we just block the top of range, so we're just piling. So yeah, that's sort of the idea there. Okay, now let's talk about some smaller turn bets, like if we're blocking with something like top pair. I'm going to unlock the tree and rerun it. Okay, so let's talk about the smaller probe sizes. So we'll just go 30% pot here. This is really just like our weak top pair, you know, some of our stronger 8x occasionally. So yeah, block call. So you know, another thing you'll notice is the top of range top pair hands are going to be raising, facing this block size. You know, ace is rarely trapping, and you know, king jack, ace jack mostly raising. So even like some jack 10 stuff that wants some protection against overcards. So let's get kind of a bricky river, not a total brick, but something like this. So it's a lower card that sort of interacts with those lower straights. So now you'll notice we're doing quite a bit of betting on the river. So pull up this hotness map. So after it goes block call, you'll notice out of position is doing quite a bit of blocking across most rivers. This is because when we block, we're trying to get some sort of thin value, and we don't face a raise on the turn. So if we have top pair, we're pretty confident about our hand, especially since imposition is going to be raising 5-4 a decent bit on the turn. So after street's complete, we're not too worried. Now we'd rather just get value from ace high or some low pairs, 8x, stuff like that. So, or we can, you know, value bet an 8 ourselves. So, yeah. So we'll look at this block size. It's going to be mostly 8x, right? You know, most of the 8x just, you know, blocking river. Some of the ace 8 is checking to check call, unblocking bluffs. And then when we have top pair, the weaker top pair is going into like this middling size, like this 2/3 size. And then the overbet on the river is going to be like our top of range top pair. Because remember, after we block the turn, you know, Jack X is pretty high in our range. So if we have something like Jack 10 or Jack 9, these are worth quite a bit. So we can actually overbet the pot here after we don't face a raise on the turn, because imposition's pretty capped. So in these block lines, it's important to think about, you know, after, okay, if I block turn, how high up is my top pair now? Because, you know, Jack 10 is worth more than a blind and a half on the turn. It's just we're kind of, you know, mixing a bit of everything into this size. So if we do show up to the river with Jack 10 or Jack 9 in this line, you know, these are worth a good number of big blinds on the river. But, you know, generally, if we block turn, we're going to have mostly thin value bets. So that's why you're going to see so much blocking. And then if we get a high river, now we're not going to be doing as much blocking ourselves. Like, we're not going to be value betting like 8-7 or 9-8 on a queen river or king river. 9-8, 10-8 actually getting in there a little bit, but that's just because they block the offsuit king 10, whereas 8-7 doesn't, because imposition doesn't have king 7 off. So if you're going to make a really thin value bet like this, you want to block top pairs as best you can. Yeah, and then in the block size, you know, your turn bluffs don't have to be nearly as strong, so you can you're going to get to the river with quite a bit of air. So you have to be selective. Yeah, you can't just blindly use every non-made hand here. You're gonna have to have some give ups on these higher rivers. whereas on lower turns or on lower rivers where your opponent rarely improves, you know, you're going to retain your equity advantage, so you can well, retain your equity advantage a bit better, so you can bluff more of this air. But the key thing to think about is, okay, if I block, what do my opponent's floats look like? It's going to be a lot of high cards, right? Because they check back the flop. It's going to be a lot of king queen, ace king, ace queen, ace 10, ace 9, stuff like that. Stuff that has an overcard to the 8, especially. So after it goes back call, when you have a low card in your hand, it's very good because you just unblock folds. And you actually block top pair when you have something like 6-4 clubs. But what you'll notice is when you have like 6-4 spades, you don't block top pair because the jack is the spade. And imposition only has the suited combos of jack 6, jack 4. So, you know, when you're constructing a big bet range on the river, your bluffs need to have better blockers to top of range. So, you know, when you have 6-4 diamonds, you actually double block top pair. So that's why it's going into the bigger size more often. Yeah, and on this river, you can value bet much more thin because your opponent doesn't really improve on this card very often at all. Okay. Yeah, and you'll notice stuff like, you know, queen 9 giving up a lot, king 9 giving up a lot, because they block those floats that you want imposition to fold on the river if you bet. Okay, let's talk about a more connected dynamic run out. Okay, so I created a new tree, gave it the 6 of clubs, so it's jack 8, 3, 2 spades, rainbow 6. So now you'll notice out of position is doing a tad bit more betting. That's because on a 6, both players improve a bit more often. Like out of position is going to improve to a 6 on this board more often than they would on a deuce, for example. So on a deuce, imposition is going to retain their equity advantage because neither player really improves all that often. So their high cards are still going to be pretty strong. Whereas on a 6, you know, out of position is going to have like 7-6 off, 6-5 off, 6-4, whatever else. So out of position is going to be doing a bit more betting with some 6x, especially like 6x spades, just to get some thin value, deny some equity. Yeah, and then imposition's still going to be using a relatively polar size, or a polar strategy, I should say. So now imposition's thinnest value bets are really just going to be a lot of top pair and then some stronger 8x. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, for the smaller size, remember that you have, like, this board is so dynamic. You have a million draws to choose from. You have flush draws, all the gutters in the world, a bunch of open enders, 5-4, 9-7, 10-9, all open enders. So you have to put some thought into how you want to construct which draws go into the small bet, big bet, and check, right? So just to make this a bit more simple, I'm going to cut down the sizes available. I'll just give it a small size and a big size. Okay, so here I just gave it 33, 133, just so we could visualize what's going on a bit better. So first, let's talk about the big size, and then we'll work backwards. Actually, I'd rather just look at it like this. So let's open up this Range Explorer here. So for this big size, you know, the general threshold is going to be, you know, like queen jack off plus, because generally the top pair that imposition is going to be checking back on the flop is going to be worse than, mostly worse than Queen Jack. You're mostly going to be betting King Jack, Ace Jack. So now, as far as draws go, this is going to be kind of important because if you bet big, you don't want to put money into the pot with a bunch of hands that often get dominated by better draws. So we look at the flush draws. Actually, let's just, yeah. Oh, okay, that's better. So if we look at the flush draws, something like 5 deuce is checking a lot, whereas or 7-5 of spades, 7-6 of spades checking quite a bit, whereas something like Ace 4 of spades, King 4 of spades, Queen 4 of spades, very, very often big betting. So I'll give you a moment to pause the video and think about why that might be the case. Okay, so when you put a very big bet in, the imposition range is going to be more condensed to strong draws and top pair. So if you have a weak flush draw and you bet very big, well, you're often going to be called by better flush draw. Like if imposition has a flush draw, it's often going to be better than yours, which is not ideal. And then you're double blocking folds on the river. So another thing, something like King 4 or Queen 4 has going for it is that imposition is going to bet Jack X with a spade more often on the flop. So, well, actually, I think I had it reversed. But yeah, you still block like the strongest top pair for imposition with King 5, Queen 5. Let's take a look at the imposition range. So the Jack X that imposition has is going to be, Queen Jack and then Jack 7 through Jack 4. Let's think about some of these straight draws. You'll notice something like 9-7 betting relatively often, 2/3 of the time, and then something like 5-4 betting very often. Couple things going on here. First of all, when imposition checks back, their top pair is going to be more condensed to worse kickers. So when you have lower cards in your hand, you actually do a better job of blocking top pair, because imposition is going to bet Jack 7 more than Jack 5 on the flop. So when you have a 5 and a 4 in your hand, you do a bit better of a job of blocking imposition's top pair. Additionally, when you bet big, so it's important to note that 5-4 gets dominated by some draws. So 9-5 would be the draw that makes the super straight on the 9, or the 7. I'm sorry. So even if you get a 7 on the river, you're still behind 9-5. So you'd rather just bet big and fold out the naked 9-5. Whereas if you check raise a hand like 5-4, you're going to be dominated by some draws. So yeah, you'd rather just bet yourself. Yeah, and then similar thing going on with something like 10-9 off versus Queen 10 off. 10-9 off is certainly a stronger draw than Queen 10. However, you know, you're going to be dominated occasionally when you bet big with 10-9, and you don't have as good of blockers to top pair, because imposition is going to bet something like um, Jack 10, Jack 9 more often than Queen Jack, because they Jack 10 and Jack 9 want more protection from overcards. So, okay, don't want to get too bogged down in the weeds here. So, yeah, we're just going to talk about some river strategy here. So let's talk about you know, some draw completing rivers. Let's start with high cards. So it's going to on a 10, you know, we're using Queen 9 off on the turn pretty often. So we should have some jams here, because facing this big bet imposition isn't going to be floating like the naked gutter very often. In theory, it's indifferent because they dominate some draws, but you know, in game, regs aren't calling these. So after you get the 10 on the river, you gotta have some really big bets. This is actually a, you know, 4.5 pot jam. So, oh, I also forgot the 9-7. So several straight combos get there on the river. Yeah, so when a good number of draws come in on the river like this, after you big bet the turn, you're going to have a ton of range protection. So you need to be mixing these straights into a smaller size occasionally. Especially something like Queen 9 off. I would challenge you to think about, I'm not going to give the answer away on this one, but I challenge you to think about why Queen 9 off would be mixing into the smaller size, whereas 9-7 is mostly just jamming or overbetting. So try to give that some thought. So assuming you're mixing some strong hands into your block size, now you can you know, get some thin value, even if you overbet the turn with, you know, some like Jack 9, Queen Jack, King Jack. Yeah. Whereas let's see, if you bet small, get this 10 river. Now you're still doing a bunch of betting because top pair hasn't changed, and a lot of your draws on the turn that are going to block hit second pair on the river. So you can still get quite a bit of thin value there, because again, on this river, you still have a good bit of range protection with all the two pairs and straights you make, but you just don't have as much of a density in those stronger hands, because your stronger bluffs are going to go into the big bet size. So your general sizing scheme here on the river should just be smaller bets, you know, just 30 and 75 or something. It's a pretty good scheme to use here. Okay, let's talk about some lower boards. So this is 7-6-4 rainbow. Imposition definitely should be. So in this sim, I allowed donks. However, in game, you know, most regs aren't playing mini donks, so the imposition player, in theory and in practice, I think, are going to be checking back a lot more than 47%. However, the general distribution of hand strengths in terms of density are going to be, I think, relatively congruent in theory and practice. So I'm going to build a subtree here and then get back. So I basically gave it the same sizing scheme as I did in the previous board. 33, 66 pot, overbet, all the good stuff. So what you'll notice is there is just a ton more betting going on. So there's a couple things going on that drives up our betting frequency here. One is, this is just a better board for us. We have significantly more offsuit board pairs, and imposition is going to be more capped on this board. So if you think about, you know, what hands are going to be checking back this board, it's going to be a lot of overcards. But the hands that have the most incentive to see bet the flop for imposition are going to be overpairs, because they unblock board pairs and they need protection. Like especially this like 8s through jacks region. Those are, like, you'll notice, 8s, 9s, 10s, jacks, mostly going to be betting the flop. So after it goes check, check, we're not too scared of these hands. Stuff like queens plus is going to be doing a lot more checking back. But imposition is just going to have a lot of high cards. And like weaker board pairs. The other thing is that on a 7 high board, our top pair needs more protection. So for instance, like on Jack 8-3 or Jack 8 deuce, Jack X, if you have Queen Jack, you don't need protection. You would rather just bet big and get value. Whereas, so yeah, on this board, if you have a 7, you'll notice that out of position is just like close to pure betting this hand class. That's just because a 7 needs more protection on 7-6-4 than a jack on Jack 8-3. Yeah, so just to recap, imposition is going to be more capped, so our 7x is stronger, and we need more protection from overcards. So, yeah, pretty much every hand class is just betting more often than it would on Jack 8-3. For those other reasons. So here we're just going to be using like a relatively high frequency, like medium bet size. On this board, I would just use like a single half pot size, or no, I'd split like 33-75, but I wouldn't do any overbetting because we have so many hands that just want to put in like 3/4 pot just to get some protection, and then put in a small bet on the river depending on the texture. So we'll just look at like this medium bet size, this 66% pot. So it goes back calls. So notice we're folding out a ton of these just naked overcards, which is great when we have a board pair that just wants some protection. The reason it's so great is because we can now comfortably value bet more rivers. So notice that we're folding out like all this naked jack high, queen high stuff. Some of the king high is starting to float, but a lot of it's folding. So then when you get like a jack river, now we can just very easily value bet the vast majority of our board pairs. Like 6-4 is, kind of a slam dunk value bet here, because imposition isn't floating naked jack high. Yeah, and you'll just notice we're doing a ton of blocking on the river. Again, in this spot, most of our river bets are going to be on the smaller side, since the vast majority of our bets are just like medium strength hands. That's just trying to get some, not thin value, but we don't have a ton of incentive to overbet a board like this. Imposition will still have some, Jack X floats, but yeah, we just want to put in a medium bet. And again, I know I've covered this in previous videos, just want to touch on it again. When imposition's bluff catching, or I should say when we're thinking about our bluff catcher's imposition here. So I'll try not to go too far into the weeds here, but it's a bit convoluted. But so in this node, out of positions, like these naked high cards, out of position is going to be bluffing with relevant suits much more often. Just naked queen jack no suit isn't going to be bluffing very often. So something like queen jack is going to be bluffing the jack of clubs more often. Whereas something like king jack, it's a strong enough high card hand that it doesn't have a ton of incentive to bluff. However, if you have the king of clubs, then it starts to get to a strong enough point where, you can start to bluff this hand just because of how good the king of clubs is. You can fold out like king queen stuff that dominates you. So when you face this bet, this 2/3 bet, and you have king queen, you want out of position to be bluffing king jack. So when you have the king of clubs, that's bad because out of positions, the king jack off that out of position is bluffing is with the king of clubs. So you don't get to dominate that hand as often. Whereas if you have king jack, well, the queen jack, the hand that you dominate, is bluffing with the jack of clubs more often. Yeah, you'd rather just fold the combo with the jack of clubs, and then when you hit a king on the river, it doesn't complete the flush, so you can get quite a bit of money in the middle. Okay, so yeah, medium bet call, and then pull up this heat map here. Kind of show you guys what's going on. So like we said, across the board, out of positions, very safe to value bet a good number of board pairs. Oh, excuse me. So yeah, imposition isn't floating much naked 10x, so on the 10 river you can value bet quite a few thin hands. And then you'll notice on some of these pairing rivers that now we're betting very, very big. And again, this ties back into what we were talking about with regards to flop play. On a low board, in position has more incentive to bet their vulnerable overpairs and top pair because they need more protection on a low board like this from overcards. So when you hit trips on the river, you have an extremely strong hand. So yeah, you can put in some very big bets. In addition to imposition can't have any boats because they're basically pure betting any hand that would make a boat on the river here, aside from like deuces full, but very negligible. And then yeah, most other rivers you can just do this block thing and mix in some, just 33-75 standard split. And then let's look at like some flush completing rivers. Yeah, so now your split starts to get a bit wider in terms of sizing. So after it goes 2/3 call and flush completes on the river, now your incentive to put in thin value bets goes down. And a lot of your value bets shift more just to top pair or queen X. And you'll notice like a lot of the 6x is starting to check. Once you get up to like jack 6, king 6, a6, you can value bet those for sure, but the flush completing on the river definitely shifts things in terms of what your thin value hands want to do. Basically just more checking, and now you're like driving your size down and your big size goes way up. Yeah. And yeah, so just on a brick river, like this naked jack, out of position still has an equity advantage here, so most of your air is just going to be bluffing for the most part. Besides these naked high cards that block folds. Yeah, but now let's look at some lower straight completing cards. So do like the 3, so it's a 1-liner to a 5. So now you'll notice the, on this draw completing river, sort of like the flush river. Now our, we're splitting quite hard again into block and overbet. It's quite a big overbet, but that's just because we have such an advantage in 5x. We have a bunch of offsuit 5x that imposition doesn't, and imposition is going to be betting flop a lot with a 5x with 5x hands that's an open ender. So yeah, on the river we're pretty liberated just to overbet a straight here. Whereas in tighter configurations, like if you think about hijack versus big blind, say like the hijack min opens pre, out of position is going to have a massive advantage in 5x. So if you have a straight on a run out like this, you can even bump the size higher. Like you could 2x pot instead of just like 150 or whatever. So you have to be thinking about like the relative strength of your nutted hands when you're constructing your sizing splits. So here is 9-8 deuce two-tone. So this is the imposition c-bet strat. So you'll notice it's still sort of a lower board, but it's much more disconnected. So stuff like tens, jacks, queens, kings, aces are going to be betting much more often. Ace 9, basically pure betting. And as the 9x gets lower, goes down in frequency. So what that means is after it goes check, out of position is going to be betting quite aggressively with something like a 9. We can look at the run out hotness runouts here. So first thing that sticks out is on high cards we're doing a lot of checking. Then on lower cards we're doing a lot more betting. And then like these lower cards that are more wet, complete straights, something like a 7, we're not going to be doing nearly as much overbetting because in a configuration like this, imposition can still make a good number of straights and 2 pair on a 7. So and the board is just so wet. We'd rather just keep the pot a bit smaller when we have a like a weak 9 or an 8 or something. So let's look at a few lower cards. So we'll get like a 4 of diamonds. Oh, actually I just built the subtree for this. So same sizing scheme here. Okay, so this is a brick 5, rainbow 5. So what you'll notice is quite a bit of blocking and then quite a bit of overbetting. And that's just a function of, like I said, like impositions checking back their strongest hands, like the overpairs and ace 9. So when we have a strong 9, we're very incentivized just to put a good bit of money in. Let me just take some sizes out here. I think I accidentally paused the video. I don't remember where I left off, but so 9-8 deuce 5. These overcards are very prime bluffs because, like we said, imposition's checking back the overpairs and strong 9x. So our pairouts with these sorts of hands are very live. If we had a queen on the river, we're feeling very good about our hand. So yeah, and then yeah, that's why these are going into the big bet so often. You know, whereas and they're just betting very frequently. Whereas some of this naked gutter stuff isn't betting nearly as often. Although certainly sometimes. And then these high-low hands, just blocking folds. So if you are going to bet these hand classes, you just need a flush draw. And then these lower straight draws are going to be, you know, this is where things, you know, ramp back up in terms of bluffing frequency. But it's very important to realize how often you should be betting a 9 here. Because imposition is very capped after flop goes check check. So if you have a good 9 here, you know, you should be putting a lot of money into the pot. So we'll look at overbet call. We'll do like this low straight completing river. So now your 9 is more towards the middle of your range, and so now you're putting in less than pot. Whereas on a deuce, you know, this doesn't improve your range hardly ever. So if you have a good 9, and it rarely improves imposition. So when you have a good 9, that's going to be the bulk of your value bets, or two pair, or you know, boat or something. So now you're just using like one primarily big size. But the more draws that complete on the river, you know, the more you're going to be splitting. See, this is a one-liner to a 6. Jack 10 gets there. So now you're certainly going to be splitting. So if you have two pair like 8-5 or you know, 9-5, just going to be splitting those hands into the block size. And then if you have a 6, you just bet big. So yeah. Now let's sort of reverse this run out and put the 7 on the turn, just like a very wet turn. Okay, so now you'll notice, given how wet the board is, even our big size is just relatively small, it's less than pot. This is just due to the very dynamic nature of the board. Imposition isn't going to have a ton of straights. They'll have a good number of them, especially on a, you know, in this configuration where they have like Jack 10 off and you know, 10-6 suited, 6-5 suited. But largely it's because if you have a 9 here, you don't want to blow the, even though your hand is pretty strong, you don't want to blow the pot up. You don't want to bet 3x pot and then you get like a 5, a 6, a 10, a jack, a spade. So you'd rather just keep the pot a bit smaller and then wait for a clean river, and then you can put more money in. So like if you have queen 9 here, you can block turn, and then you get like a brick 3, and now you can put in like a more middling to big bet. Like, you know, king 9, ace 9 are pretty good examples. Yeah, and then so when selecting bluffs on the turn here, remember the bigger you bet, generally, you know, either your draw needs to be relatively strong, or your hand does a good job at folding out hands that dominate your draw or hand or whatever. So let's look at the smaller size. Well, yeah, we'll just do it this way. So if we have, you know, a 6, so if we have like 6-5 or 6-4, 6-3, 6 deuce, these are generally betting on the smaller side, or checking, mostly checking, because if we do make a straight, it's a one-liner, so we're not going to get a ton of value, and we can still be dominated by a better draw. So, and not to mention that in this configuration, imposition is going to have a lot of just so many gutters. So, this doesn't do a great job of blocking hands that are going to continue either. So, and you don't have an overcard to the board. Whereas, you know, something like Queen 10, you have the top end of the straight draw. You have a gutter to the nuts and 2 overcards, which are, you know, like I said earlier, overcards are very important on a board like this, because imposition's so capped. So we'll look at a few different textures. We'll look at like an overcard. So block call. So now, you know, the imposition floats. It's mostly going to be more condensed to hands that interact with the board. Like Ace Jack, Ace 10 are going to float a lot more than Ace Queen, Ace King here. And then like a lot of this naked King high is folding, like King 5, King 4, King 3. So if you hit a king on the river, your hand is very strong. So you can put in like a bigger bet on the river here. Yeah, it's generally the idea. And yeah, after it goes block call on an ace, again, imposition is going to be floating a ton of just naked ace high, so because the board's so connected. So if you get this ace river in the block line, now if you have ace x 2 pair, you know, you can put in a very big bet because you almost have the nuts. And then when you have like ace x of spades, you can value bet those hands for a small size. So a lot of cool stuff going on here. Just you know, the broad takeaways I really want to harp on are think about the hands that you're folding out in your turn line, and that should really that should influence quite a number of decisions as far as your river play. So, you know, if you get if the river card doesn't hardly ever improve villain, you should be and improves hands that you have, you should be betting more often, and your split should be like, you know, your small size goes down because you have so many strong hands that you can't bet big with middling to weak hands, and your big size is going to go up because you have more of a nut advantage. So, you know, in these sorts of spots, I'd be thinking like, okay, what are my medium value bets worth? Okay, I think my medium value bets would be worth like half pot, and then I have such a strong nut advantage here. I can probably, like most of my improved top pair, can bet like one and a half pot. And then maybe you have some straights that imposition never has, and so you can have like a small jamming range for like 5x pot or whatever. So just try to do more thinking in these river nodes, and try to strategize at a deeper level, and your game will certainly improve. You know, getting good at river play is kind of a tough task. Kind of a tough task because so much thought into flop and turn strategies should go into your river decision making and your strategizing. So, yeah, definitely, like when you're in game, try to do some more deep thinking in these river spots, and go run a sim afterwards and try to get a better intuition for how these things work. So, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment. Please like and subscribe. That would be fantastic. That helps my channel tremendously. I really want to grow this channel. So, but again, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.